thinking it was time to make a change. And I thought, oh, Mount Sinai, good organization, president's office, sounds interesting, project development associate, why not? I'll submit my resume and see what happens, thinking there was almost no chance that I would ever get a response. And lo and behold, John called me, we set up an interview, we instantly hit it off. We just, from the very first week, enjoyed talking to each other, getting to know each other. I could see from the beginning that he was the kind of person that I really wanted to work with. And
she's reading this exactly as I wrote it for her.
Right. And you know what I can't do today, because John won't allow his speakers to use PowerPoints. I have an absolutely wonderful picture of John from about 30-something years ago, which I love to show his classes, but alas, this year I can't because he won't allow us to do PowerPoints.
Well, if you send it to me, I will.
You'll love it. So, John and I worked together for about 3 years. They were some of the most fun years of my entire career. He was a great boss, and I'm going to get into my first life lessons by intertwining that thought with what John meant to me as a boss. So he also forbid us to use PowerPoint, so I had to go back to old-fashioned index cards, and it wasn't easy to dig these up. Okay. So, life lesson number 1, choose your bosses carefully. And I can't overstate the importance of finding a boss who you're compatible with, someone who you know will support you and help you to grow. John just exemplified what I hoped for in a boss, and has always been one of the best. Someone who's smart, who is eager to share his knowledge with you, who is very savvy about the organization, politically astute, but also knows all of the details of the organization, is very committed to helping the staff grow and to encouraging them to fly. And these are all characteristics that I thought were really important and that helped make it such a great job for me. But I'd actually like to know from all of you, what do you consider some of the attributes of a really good boss? What's important to you in your workplace? Yep.
Transparency.
Mm-hmm. And transparency.
And I like bosses who are straightforward. So if they're doing something not the way they want it, just tell them so I can fix that. Learn from it.
Right, rather than guessing what they do. Right.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, I don't need people to sugarcoat it. I'd rather just be straight and honest, and then you take that. I'd rather work with someone who both does that, but then also likes to be spoken to in that way as well. That kind of information.
Right, I agree with you. What else?
Like bosses who challenge you.
So someone who really wants you to reach to your highest potential. Mm-hmm.
Bosses who trust you, they don't micromanage everything.
Mm-hmm. Right, and a situation where there's mutual trust, right? Okay, good. Yes.
Bosses who are willing to teach you,
Mm-hmm.
educate you on why you're doing something, what you're doing, teach you something different each every time you meet.
Right, because that's part of a great job, is growing as you spend time in the job and learning more about yourself and about the organization and what your abilities are. Anyone else?
Boss with integrity.
Right, absolutely. Good one. Again, it gets back to that trust issue. You want to trust them. You want to believe that the way that they lead is a way that you can be proud of and that you can buy into. So finding that ideal boss isn't always so easy. You've got to use your job interviews to do your best to sort of uncover at least the basic elements of a prospective boss's personality. There are questions that you might consider formulating before you even go into the interview to help you to get a sense of who the boss is. And I have to tell you that sometimes interviewers are a little surprised when people ask about their management styles, for example, or what they expect of their bosses. But others are really welcoming of that sort of thing and grateful that people think enough about the position that they're going into to ask those kinds of questions. So I would say don't be shy. If there's something on your mind, you have really not that many chances in your interviews to get to know your prospective boss a little bit before you maybe are offered the job and then have to decide whether to accept it.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
On the mischievous side, if you add on to what Leslie said, so you really have a good understanding of who you're working for. If you handle the interview, if you walk out of an interview and the person interviewing you has done 80% of the talking, they're gonna when you walk out, they're gonna say, boy, that kid David, he's terrific. Because you got them to talk, everyone likes to talk about themselves. So part of the interviewing skill is one, to make sure it fits, but second is to make that person who's interviewing you feel good about himself or herself. So the more they talk, the more they're going to say, wow, that was fun. That's human
Right.
nature.
On the other hand, if you're too quiet in the interview and let the other person do all the talking, then they're not really going to learn who you are. And one of the most important things is to do enough research before an interview about the organization and the job so that you have some questions ready to ask. Some can be really generic questions, and some can be very much tailored to the information that came out during the interview. But you want to come in looking prepared. You want to give the appearance of caring enough about the job to have done your research beforehand, and that will always impress a prospective boss. So while we're on the subject of bosses, I do want to add sort of a corollary lessons learned, which is don't base your decision to take a job solely on being thrilled with a particular boss. And I'll tell you about my own personal experience in that regard, and it's something always to keep in mind. So my first job, when I was getting ready to graduate from graduate school, I met an alumna of our program who was smart and friendly and just the kind of person in every way that I thought would be a great person to work for. The job itself, yeah, not so great, but I thought that working for her would be such a terrific learning experience that the job would take care of itself. 3 months into my job there, she received a great job offer and left. So I was fresh out of graduate school. I had lost the person who made me take the job in the first place. I knew I couldn't leave immediately because hopping around from job to job, especially that early in your career, is not a good thing to do. And I learned the hard way that you have to have both. You have to have a boss who you think is going to be there for you and teach you and do all those good things, but you've also got to like the job and be excited by the job. So if that individual leaves, you have enough to keep you going and keep you happy for a long time. So any comments?
Have any of you fallen into that predicament? Where you got a job and the person left and you said, oh my God, what am I doing?
Yes.
I've had it happen more than once.
Yeah.
But only once where I took the job specifically because of the person. But quite a number of jobs where my bosses have left. And I've stayed behind. And I have to say, most of the time, it's worked out. And, you know, there are a lot of good people out there who sort of fill in when people leave, but it can be a little traumatic sometimes. So, yeah, sure.
I'm sure, what kind of questions would you be prepared to receive to ferret out what the management style was and what the I never, it would seem to me like a little intrusive to get
Well, I think that some people might be startled by the questions, but I think part of it is how you phrase it. I have had people ask me many times, well, they've asked me very directly, what's your management style? And I'll explain that I believe in teamwork and that I try to mentor and support my staff and that I want them to learn about the organization. Another way to do it is maybe a little bit less directly and to talk about, to ask about growth opportunities in the organization and to sort of ferret out what they might say in terms of their own enthusiasm about opportunities. You know, sometimes when you're hired, it's hard to hire a new employee. It's a lot of work for the person who's doing the hiring. Sometimes people don't want to let you go so fast, and other people are very encouraging of personal development and growth, and especially in a large organization, giving you the opportunity to move on to other things. And you have to do it delicately, and I think you have to do it thoughtfully. You know, sort of figure out how to phrase the question so that you're not intrusive, but are simply trying to learn in a reasonable way a little bit more about the individual. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. So, life lesson number 2, these are not necessarily in any order. Life is short. Don't stay in a job that you don't like. So that was actually a piece of advice that somebody gave me in college. And I was way too young at the time to appreciate the importance of that. It's like, what do you mean you don't stay in a job you don't like? Of course I'm gonna like my job. And there are 100 reasons why you might end up staying in a job longer than you should. You have to know what makes a job worthwhile to you. And I'm going to throw this out to you because everybody's different. Everyone values different things in their work life. And I'm curious to hear some of the things that you think are important in terms of your work environment and your own job. Any thoughts?
I think that some of the things that Mark Cuban actually says is that you should just be getting paid to learn. So the second you're not learning on the job, you're just kind of bored of being redundant and it's time to.
Right. And you know what's interesting about that though, because there is a certain element of repetition in every job. So there's sometimes a sort of a delicate balance, a delicate balance between doing the same things repeatedly and doing them so often that you feel like you're suffocating. So that's sort of a personal decision, but I agree. If you don't feel like you're growing, then there's something wrong.
To piggyback on that, I think it's not just the repetition, but it's being challenged. You're doing the same thing over and over, but you find yourself challenged when you do it as if you're learning, you're getting better at it to the point where you stop feeling like you're being challenged. I think that's when you kind of say, okay, it's time to move on to something different.
About some other things that make a job a good job. How about your colleagues? If you're working in an environment where you really like the people that you're working with, you feel that you work well together, that you support each other, you know, it can make all the difference between a happy work situation and an unhappy work situation. I actually made, yeah.
Would you say your names?
Could you tell me your name?
No.
Nelia works for me.
I was going to say rewarding. Like you have to feel like you make a difference,
Mhm.
and that adding value to your organization.
Absolutely.
Having a great boss, right?
She's gonna take that offline.
I am very, very fortunate with my boss.
So, oh, go ahead.
I think people have to stop. Oh, I'm Kyle. People stop taking you. They don't take you for granted because I think if you're in a position for too long and you start to get good at your job or you do it really well, people start to have this like high. They just stop appreciating it and they expect this quality of work from you, and they don't understand like that's something that you're delivering that someone else in your shoes might not be able to deliver that. I think that's a sign for me at least.
Right, that's a good one. What do you do in a situation like that? If you think you're doing a really good job, but you're being taken for granted, how can you? That's one option. Other ideas?
I think it depends on who it's coming from. So it's like, for me personally, I just got a new position because I started feeling that way, and it wasn't necessarily that it was coming from my own boss, where if you feel like it's coming from someone that you report to, you can like try to make a difference. But if it's people that, not that you work, so I work with doctors, so if like the doctors started taking advantage of it or it's taking me for granted, like I just felt like you can't really change that. That's a culture that you can't change how they think or.
Right, you can't change how they think, but I wonder how often having the conversation to raise the issue is worth trying. Because sometimes people are unaware of their behavior and everyone sort of gets into a rhythm. And
Have you ever actually done it?
I have asked for different kinds of work. I have been asked as a boss for more challenging work. And I actually think that's a great thing. I love it when people do that. And, again, sometimes someone will be receptive to that, and sometimes they'll look at you like you have two heads.
Have you ever encountered either as an employee or just your experience, an individual who has heard or gets the feeling that they can't grow because their boss essentially doesn't want to see you move out of that position, or you're being considered for other roles within the organization, but in the end they're not going to pick you because they don't want to anger your current boss for whatever reason, out of the position or status.
Yes.
So how do you approach that?
I think that that's a really tough one. If you have a boss whose focus is so much on his or her group that we can't see the importance of the individual members of the group and maybe the wrong group to work on. I don't know how successfully you can challenge somebody who has that sort of an attitude. I mean, imagine the conversation. I'm applying for other jobs and you're not supporting me. And the person would think, well, you're leaving. Why should I encourage that? I don't know if that's a real winning situation. If there's a way out of that other than to.
Do you have a way, David, to mentor someone who's nearby in the department who could fit your role well and demonstrate that to your boss?
I wish.
When I need to lower my expectation to the company or other department, I think it's time to leave. Like I had to stop sending suggestions or ideas, and then when I present what I found, and then I see it's not used, and the people, it seems like people are not really interested in expanding or growing more. Then I think it's better to move and find other opportunity.
Right, and I think that's totally legitimate. And again, it's such a personal decision. Not every idea that you come up with is going to be accepted, but you do want to have a sense that your input is appreciated and that you really are contributing to the group group or the organization. And if you find repeatedly that the input that you're providing is ignored, I think it's a reason for you to think about the job. But again, in thinking about the job, sort of the totality of the job is so complicated. It's never or rarely one thing that makes somebody love or hate a job. There are so many reasons that people stay in certain jobs. There are things that they get out of it at the same time that they're annoyed with certain aspects of it. So it really becomes a balancing act. For example, and one of my other, actually it's the next one, is a work-life balance question. So sometimes the job that you're in isn't one where you have the best and most supportive boss or doing the most interesting work, but maybe you're getting paid a decent salary to do that work, and you're not so sure that you could match that salary if you moved for whatever reason. Or the commute or the hours are what you need. Say you're a working parent and you are trying to juggle different things, and this job offers you flexibility in terms of your time commitment or your commute, and that weighs into the decision. And again, you're looking at the different pieces of what that job gives you and what you give to the job, and you're weighing them, and everyone's different. I can tell you in my all the years that I've spent at Mount Sinai, one of the things that I've appreciated most is the flexibility that I was given throughout the years to raise two children and to address their needs when they needed me, and never neglecting work, but changing my hours if I had to, working nights and weekends if I had to make up for it. It was a supremely flexible environment. I had some great bosses, who allowed that to happen. So for me, even if work wasn't great every single day of every single year, for a lot of reasons, it was really very good for me in a lot of ways. Now the job happens to be great. Right now, right. My kids are grown now. It's much easier. Yeah, I guess we've just worked through the work-life balance. But the one message that I did want to give you on the importance of work-life balance is that you never want to work so hard that you totally neglect your family and friends and outside interests, because in the end, you have to decide what matters most. But my guess is that those personal relationships matter as much as work, and that you can't lose sight of that. And it's very easy. It's very easy to get sucked into a job, and it can be exciting. It can be financially rewarding. It can be the power trip that John described. I mean, there are so many different things that compel people to work harder and harder and harder. And at the end of the day, you want to be able to look around and feel like you have, you've given your job everything that you can, but you haven't sacrificed that other part of your life in doing that. And it is really tough. And I think especially for women, and especially for women who are moms, it can be a real challenge. But it's something that you have to always keep in mind. And I'm always happy to talk about that. So any thoughts on this?
Anyone
I
here?
can't tell if that's a.
Anyone here have kids yet? How are you handling it?
And you're working, and you're going to school,
Yeah.
and you have kids, impressive. How do you do it?
I guess, my priority actually is my kid first. Yeah, and then, like my work and study. So, and I don't have a really social life now. All my free time I'm either with my kids or, I study. Yeah, I guess that's now, but, I'm kind of like want to catch up with my friends, after I graduate.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that you hang on to the family and your studies and your job, and pretty much everything else goes by the wayside.
Right, and it changes over time, so that your priorities one year aren't necessarily your priorities in another year.
But that's where a good boss comes in, because I'm very fortunate to have great support network, and I dedicate time to my daughter in the sense that we have specific nights that I don't do schoolwork and I don't do anything. That night is hers and we do whatever. But my boss is incredibly flexible. I have a parents' conference. His philosophy is, as long as you get the work done for the day, you go out for the 2 hours and come back. So it works really well.
And I think there are more and more bosses like that. I think that there's a lot of sensitivity to that. I mean, not everybody, and some jobs just don't lend themselves to that kind of flexibility. But you're really lucky when you find one that does.
And the flexibility gives back, because you feel you want to do more
Right, that's
to
right.
make it right and not lose
Absolutely.
that opportunity. So I think they don't realize the employee really appreciates it and will get back once they feel that sort of flexibility to get things done.
Yep, and it makes you want to stay in that
Yeah.
job, because you know how lucky you are to have that. Anyone else? Okay, let's see, going through these cards. Here's one I always like. Learn from your mistakes. So everybody makes mistakes. Some of them are going to be small mistakes, and some of them are going to be doozies. And what you want to do when you make a mistake in the workplace is acknowledge it, figure out what you've done wrong, and how you can prevent making the same mistake again, and then move on.
It's that easy to move on.
Well, it's not that easy to move on if no one else lets you forget it, but if you, and I don't know about all of you, but when I make a mistake at work, I'm sort of consumed with this sort of sense of needing to understand it, fix it fast, tell everyone who needs to know, and then hope we all forget it and move on. Generally you do, because again, everyone makes mistakes. But anyone have any war stories about this, sort of mistakes that you've made? I don't know if you want to admit them here, but mistakes that you've made at work that that you either were tempted to bury and didn't. And then, I think that your mistakes is the employee who didn't last for very long, who was a chronic mistake hider. And we would talk to her, and she'd say, no, that wasn't me. But it had to have been. And a pattern developed. It became very easy eventually to have sort of a smoking gun where we could say to her, come on, there's no one else who could have done this. It was actually a computer thing where but if she had all mistake said, that you're, for whatever reason, that you can't to have somebody who chronically hides information.
Finance Committee meeting of the board at Jersey City. And it was a very one of those crisis times. And one of the board members got up and left. And it was a board member contact with Trent, where we got them. I came back and I got looks, and the next day, the chairman and the vice chairman to take the bullet. Now, she eventually became the Attorney General of the state, pretty powerful woman, but I could never convince them. And they wouldn't accept my explanation. And it took me about 6 months till they got over.
You own it, but people are not.
And how about some of you? What's the worst mistake you've done?
Well, I wasn't gonna say what, but and how they developed the culture. A lot of ramifications that are now concerned for the organization.
Right.
So I think part of it.
It's true. It's true. Other.
It's very interesting. I've heard somebody, my boss's boss. People always ask us to go our level when we take care of mistakes. It's very interesting to hear. Consider a mistake, like you sent the wrong report to someone, or you messed up on something, or you turned something late. And then to hear, it's interesting to hear what our mistakes are.
Is actually, that's an interesting point. That I had a case where we were recruiting a high-level person, and he was emails were flying back and forth and back. Quite a few years ago, I sent a note, I thought, to my boss saying, the guy and I had to go into my boss and tell him what I had. A who went, well, the recruit ended up coming. Still about Sinai. He's an absolutely came was really after thing ever that you can't sink any higher. So I believe honesty is the best one. So. One I've done in classes before. I know John likes this one. This is one of my mentors. So, you have to have,
I
oh, go
I
ahead.
have to interject.
Okay.
Lucky that we got to work together. But when I was at Jersey City, Nancy, my executive assistant, would come up and say, so-and-so is on the phone. He'd like to speak to you. He had just got fired and thought he should look for a job in New Jersey.
Who can work through certain sometimes you will want to have more than one mentor because maybe do what you want to do, and a single person can't really address all of them. So you have different mentors for different to know from all of you. Stories that you want to tell about how either you found your mentor.
He was my first boss. When I entered I worked less with this guy than the other. But we ended up just connecting more on a personal level and beyond professional. And entering into a different side of business. He's so making changes like fast and should I stay with the system? Should I leave?
Yeah, it really helps to have somebody who knows you, who worked with you, to bounce those kinds of ideas off of. And it can be pretty
Aware of the online mentor. So I have like mentors who are even helpful, so I meet with them, get advice from, but I think I have a longer than me, so I'll sit down with him and just talk, and he knows the system, and he knows personalities and how things have dealt with. It's just a good person to have a relationship with. So it sounds like he's not a senior person or a boss, he's just someone who knows the knowledge base you can learn from.
right. It's amazing sometimes how people who have been in a job or in an organization for a long time have a lot of wisdom to share and often have time and really want to do that sort of thing. It's a role that, they're mutually beneficial. Anyone else?
I think finding a good mentor is a rarity sometimes. And the reason I say that is because sometimes you don't know that you've got a good, you don't know what a good mentor is until you've actually had one. I reflect back on the first year I started working, and I was working in a really dysfunctional group. All the bosses, they're infighting and they ran, bullying, and all kinds of stuff. I didn't know anything, I didn't know the difference between that, because first job, I just kind of assumed this is how things function. The next job immediately after that, I got this fantastic mentor. He basically brought me in and said, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, this is why we're doing it. He threw a bunch of jobs at me, challenged me, and explained to me. He threw 6, 10 jobs at me, and then bring me in a couple weeks later and said, do you know why I did that? He explained the reasons why he did that. He went to process and showed what we were doing. And then I moved on to another job, and I think I sought that mentor in somebody else, and it wasn't there. I just assumed that, and this guy was fairly high level. He was right below the executive team. And the next boss I had was right below the executive team too. I just assumed it was the level of maturity and experience in the next person. So future things you need. I'm still thinking myself to this day because I'll just catch up with this guy. But if you can keep in contact with that person who's going to continue to help you grow and build yourself, I think you're only going to do to help yourself because it is such a rarity to find somebody that's going to help you with that.
Those are great comments.
One of them passed away, but I'm still very close to Mike. He's 90 years old. I'm retired. He's still my mentor.
Is your mentor always going to be your boss, or are there exceptions, or not your boss?
So, you go to so many meetings and you have so many opportunities at things that sometimes you just sort of single somebody out who you know you'd like to get to know better, who you you reach out to them. If you can have a cup of coffee, just to sort of talk about ideas, get interested in helping and bigger than you think. But when you look around and you see people that you think good advice from, worst that they're going to do is say, sorry, I don't have time, or whatever. That's right. That's right.
This thing about whether the boss mentor thing, I'm sure there are cases where boss mentor works, but to me, if you can have a mentor who's a little off to the side, someone who, when you're having a problem at a certain time where, someone else. And with your boss, that's okay.
That's right. That's right. And also your boss may become your mentor after he or she is no longer your boss. Because that go to when you're in trouble and need some help is what I love. A mentor, someone that you can go to, not in times of crisis, when you need some advice, support, whatever. A guardian, someone who's watching your back. And in like that, someone knows your situation, maybe even someone you're up for promotion or up for to go to bat for you. Or usually sort of in the background, a guardian angel steps up to the plate in sort of times of crisis. And they are really, really good to have, and you're lucky when you find in times of crisis.
We're gonna end at 7. Would you just spend a few minutes on
Throw these into the crowd. For a long time, but I think I've been in the dean's office at Mount Sinai for about you're associate dean for faculty affairs and administration, and what are all issues relating to faculty. Policy development relating to faculty. Under my purview. Just all sorts of special projects that don't sort of fit neatly into any bucket often end up coming to me. And actually, I work in the dean's office. In our group, highly often we work together almost in projects that any of our buckets, sometimes working very closely together on some of those projects, and super flexible job in terms of I mean, you know, I have my lists, and some days I don't get to my lists because I never know when eats up my entire day. My boss is the dean of the medical school. He is a great boss. It's a pretty close-knit group. And that's what I do. So, yeah.
You said you started on the hospital side or what side?
Never.
Never, so you wasn't
Never.
connected.
Yeah. No, you know, I was there. I was doing financial administrative work. So, but I've never been on the hospital side. Rather than the hospital, there's a surprising amount of separation.
Their challenges is we
And then I pretty much stumbled into the medical school. But when I came to Mount Sinai, there wasn't that much planning. There was a lot of stumbling, but you know, you really want to be as thoughtful as you can. And I feel like, you know, I've been lucky. I've worked with a lot of good people and a lot. So. I don't know. Come on, we have 5 minutes. He's gonna hand going up, okay.
Because the people you work with, someone who works in a literary organization, doesn't have a lot of exposure to a lot of people in terms of navigating.
That's a really good question. So in terms of not glamorous, I spent a number of years at Mount Sinai working in an office that used to be a closet. And I am not kidding. It was an administrator in the department, and my boss was extremely difficult, challenging workspace. A boss who drove me crazy. I liked actually the people in the department, and I think that that was my salvation. Great. And at that time, personal reasons to want to stay in move on, but it's amazing how you can adapt by doing things like boss to the extent you can. If your boss ways to make sure that you're doing the work, keeping your boss informed of the work, but not necessarily but it is true. And it was a person and personally, professionally, I knew I had a lot to learn on that. Stay put for a while, so I just sort of it's probably not a very good.
Any other questions?
I don't want to end on that.
Yes. You got a new title, I asked you what.
Combined with what was formerly called the Continuum Health System. So our medical school went from having a single partner hospital, Mount Sinai Hospital, to having 7 hospitals partnering in our system with a single medical school, creating an enormous amount of work for all of us and taking to start. But when I look back now, it's been not quite 2 years since we merged. But I wonder, what would I have been doing if this hadn't happened? I mean, it injected the and all this interesting stuff. Along and all challenging. It's sort of the kind of thing you want to happen in your job, provided to do it. I feel lucky that I could be part of that. So it's a challenge, but it's also a plus. Expanded.
So at times like that, but can consume. Which is very modest. I mean, there are about, what, 50 other deans in the.
We have so many deans now.
But senior associate deans. So
Just in
that's
our
what?
area, there are more.
What?
I said there are.
And for if you have a good boss, That recognizes. That note, thank you very much.